are. And so going into it, I thought, well, how could I make this a little bit more about myself? And so if you know me, you know I love Disney. And so I couldn't help myself. Whoops. So I thought, my K-State story should look a little something like this. And then I was like, well, that's not right. It should look a little more like this. We gotta have some pride in there, because I learned something about K-State is that y'all have an immense amount of pride here. And so some of the things that I wanted to talk about was, well, how did I get here in the first place, right? So for some of you, you may not know this, so I am a challenge course facilitator at Florida State. This is me with my wonderful supervisor, Jordan Merrick. And so you might be wondering, why the heck am I telling you about the man I like to call the man in camo? And he looks like this on most days, right? And so Jordan Merrick is really salient to why I'm here at K-State. In the week prior to my second round interview, I was ready to call Marcus and say, hey, I don't want to interview for this position anymore. I was having a really stressful time. I was feeling really burnt out in res life. And so I was just having a horrible week, and I said, you know what, I'm going to drive over to the res. I want to talk to someone who's not in housing. And so that was talking to Jordan Merrick. And so what did Jordan tell me? So Jordan started telling me about alligators. He said, imagine you go home right now, you open the door, and you go into a room of alligators and kittens. Thanks to Aisha for providing some kitten photos. And so I was like, okay, where are you going with this? This is weird, right? And I always discount Jordan because, he's a guy who runs around building things, climbing things. And this alligators and kittens metaphor kind of started representing a difference between negative and positive thoughts, negative and positive outlooks on things. And so in that week, I was challenged to start thinking a little bit more about those alligators and how do I get rid of those alligators in my life, right? Because you can't just fill up the room with more kittens. He said the alligators would eat the kittens. And so if you know Florida State, you know that the alligators look a little something like that, right? So that's University of Florida, our rival school. And so I started filling up my life with a little bit, started kind of addressing some of those negative outlooks and negative thoughts. And so I started, and I came here to K-State. And so when I came here to K-State, I kind of took that as my model for going into things, and I wanted to come here and share my passions with you all. One of them is Disney. And so I figured, I'm going to talk about Disney songs, right? And that's how I'm looking at my K-State story through Disney songs. If I'm ever going to Disney, because I have an annual pass, I'm going to play a ton of Disney songs. And so while some of them were really easy to find, it was a little challenging. So I figured, you know what, I'm going to make a playlist for y'all of what my K-State story is. And if y'all want to play it in the dining hall, feel free. So the first thing, obviously, catch this flight. And then when I get here, and it's a whole new world. And so I included some lyrics, a whole new world, a new fantastic point of view, no one to tell us no or where to go, or say we're only dreaming. That was one of the first things that happened in one of my committee meetings was I was with CA centralization, and I said, Alex, I don't know if I'm dreaming too big, and he said, you're never dreaming too big, right? And so we started kind of going through this and thinking, it's not too big to dream, and trying to get these new experiences and these new points of view. And so part of that was coming in and talking about my learning goals. And so I sat down with Dan in one of the first weeks here, and he talked about, well, what do you want to get out of this? That was way harder than I anticipated. So here are some of the learning goals that I came up with. And the top portion are the learning outcomes that I had for my leadership course and applying that leadership course to this experience. And then these bottom ones were more of the personal things that I wanted to get to know. I wanted to know what campus climate was like here at K-State. I wanted to know what kind of opportunities that students had to get resources here and what that relationship looked like with housing and dining and those partners, right? And so then I also had service learning, leadership capacities, and K-State 360, right? First day, we're talking about K-State 360, and I'm like, what the heck even is that, right? And then we're constantly interacting with student leaders, so leadership was a big part of that. And service learning, if you know me, is a big part of what I do back at Florida State with volunteering in the animal shelter there. So, overview of what my committee placements were. So I had CA centralization, student staff training, O&E with Brooks, I did the ADA audit. I helped Anna with some MSL things, and then the common read facilitation. Also, that is from my first day here, so I figured I'd put that in there. So what were some of the outcomes of my committees? So I had CA centralization. Part of that was a lot of getting feedback on Wednesdays. For one, I was super impressed with it because my school is still entirely on paper, right? The fact that you have an inventory that you can pull from was absolutely amazing to me. And giving feedback on that CA manual, presenting at senior staff training or CA committee, and then kind of being thrown this Firewatch team and like going about how are we going to do that. And then O&E kind of, Brooks gave us a crash course on that over breakfast. And it was like, you gotta be fast, you gotta respond to these families, it's gonna be high intensity, you're gonna need to adapt quickly. And so learning in that fast-paced environment was something I never got to do previously. And then I want to touch on student staff training last because it was one of my favorite things. So I was with Jess and Taylor and we coordinated those spirit days. So what those spirit days look like is we're gonna have a Scooby-Doo theme called Scooby-Doo Unmasking the Leader in You, which got me so excited because I loved Scooby-Doo growing up. And then some of the online training modules. So for the online training modules, I helped update the module guide, get some of the resources back onto that page, and then at-risk training became something of a focus for me with that as well. And so I'll talk a little bit more about at-risk training moving forward when I get to my campus partners. But that was something that was a really big deal to me, being able to sit down and kind of strategize with Matt and some of those campus partners of what could at-risk training look like. So, another project of mine was the ADA audit and going through all of those rooms. So I was finishing up, I had Boyd, Putnam, and West. And so getting to go through those rooms, and this was an experience that really taught me a lot about able-bodied privilege, right? Some things that we don't think about and that we take for granted, being able to turn on a shower, being able to open a door, and those kinds of pieces. So here at the bottom are some of the things that I was looking for, whether or not you had a horn or a strobe in a room, or both, preferably. Whether the shower you could roll into it, remove the shower head, if it had a bench, those kinds of pieces. Can you roll under the shower or under the sink? Can you turn on the faucet, right? And then do you have to turn a knob to open a door, or do you need an automatic door? So next, I kind of want to talk about the challenges that I faced while I was here. So it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, right? You know, you wouldn't learn something if you didn't challenge yourself. And so I was very much the type of person that by the end of this time, Dan said, there's one thing I've learned about you, and it's that you like to be busy. And that is 100% true. I need to be busy, or else I feel like I'm getting nothing accomplished. So I included Try Everything from Zootopia, which if you haven't heard it, that song is a bop. So what are some of the lyrics that I put from there? I won't give up, no I won't give it, till I reach the end. And then I'll start again. I want to try everything. I want to try it even though I could fail. Right? I'm not scared of failing. I'm not scared of challenging myself. But also, when does trying everything become a problem? And so we're going to get into some of that. So some of the transitional challenges that I was facing a lot of imposter syndrome, wondering, why am I even here? Why would Marcus and Margot choose me over tons of other applicants that they had, right? And then I got here and I was like, well, I don't know anyone. I could just call home, talk to my mom, talk to my friends, but they don't understand student affairs. So that's really hard to talk to them about that. And I had like literally just met Dan, and I was like, well, you know, I don't really know him yet, so how can I, you know, express some of these concerns that I'm having? So some of the things that was important was finding that connection. And two folks, obviously, that were really important to me were Brandon and Aisha. And then talking about imposter syndrome, we talked about this a lot at STARS, and that was really, really important to me. And recognizing that y'all are very much about development, y'all wanted me to grow and you wanted me to learn, and should not necessarily question my place here, and kind of go forward and encourage myself to learn and challenge myself, right? And so some other community pieces that I wanted to hit on was jam sessions. So a lot of times when we're driving to Sonic or softball games or those things, it was Aisha, Brent, Brandon, and I in the car singing our butts off, particularly to Lion King in that one instance. And then I loved that y'all played community sports together. One, you're representing K-State in the community, which is really awesome, right? And then you're building community amongst each other, right? Like, we don't just go to work and say, all right, see you later. Like, we're like, hey, want to go play softball? And like, who the heck has their director playing softball? Let me tell you, Shannon Staten, lovely woman, but I couldn't see her playing softball, probably because it would be really challenging for her. And then building community over having meals together. So that was a really important part. So this is Aisha and I at IHOP one day. And then just having those meals with you all in Kramer was some of the most important conversations that I had here and getting comfortable here. So if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you, right? And so I was feeling early on like, I don't have a whole lot to do. I have a ton of free time. I would just kind of sit in the MSL and I was like, well, what do I do now, you know? And then making the most of a short-term experience, when I was feeling that pressure, like, I'm not doing a whole lot, I don't feel like I can talk about a whole lot after this, you know, what can I do? And Stars College was really great, but it really, really put the pressure on me. It made me think like, dang, everyone here is talking about what they're gonna bring back to their institution, and I don't even know what I'm gonna do when I get back. I don't even have a place to live, right? And so that really put the pressure on me, and it kind of fueled that imposter syndrome that I was feeling early on, right? And then learning how to manage autonomy and how to manage my time very differently than I have in the past. And so what I did was had some open and honest conversations with folks. So I sat down with Brandon because he's done an internship before, and I was like, you know, you'd be a really great resource to me, you know, let's talk through this, you know, help me so that I can do better and I can, you know, grow in this experience, right? And then I talked to Marcus too, and I talked to Dan, and so we brainstormed, I wrote out a plan, I started contacting folks, and I made a list of everything I wanted to do before I left K-State, right? So it goes back to that try everything piece. Yes, it was great that I made a list, but I got really ambitious. And so I asked for more stuff to do, right? So other duties as assigned, or as I like to say, other projects as requested. So some of the things that I did was talk to Anna about SJA and the MSL, right? She needed to organize that space. So we organized that space, but while we were doing that, we were having conversations about what can we do here, and like, what can we do next to help set her up for the year, right? And then the tunnel of awareness was something that she asked me to do some research on. And so I'll be getting that out to her next week, but sharing some topics of discussion, like what can we talk about in that setting? And then also connecting with some campus partners. Like this week I talked to some folks over at the Diversity and Multicultural Student Affairs, and they really want to be a part of that. And so how can we get them connected with us to do those things, right? And then provide insight on successful implementation of this, but also the not so successful things, because we want to steer away from doing those things. Or if we're going to do those things, how can we reinvent it so that it can be successful? And then the other project that was probably the most challenging thing was this common read facilitation. This was a time where I was navigating the storming phase with the intern group. We were very much not at each other's throat, but we really challenged and pushed each other to think differently. And so we came up with this amazing race idea, and I'm really glad that you all enjoyed that. And so providing this facilitation to you guys was something that I was really proud of, and so those are the two activities that I wrote up, providing that what do you need materials-wise, writing those objectives, and then giving you all a flow of what it could look like, or if you wanted to do those things individually, right? And then next thing was connecting with those campus partners. Like I said, I got ambitious. So these are some of the folks that I talked to. Jason had nothing but great things to say about HDS, nothing but great things to say about Nick and the relationships that we have with them, right? And then learning about what the Office of Student Life does here, because it's not about student involvement. That's a quite different office. And then talking to Stephanie from CARE and recognizing what we can do as a campus partner, and then talking to Wendy, that was really interesting. And so, yeah, that was overwhelming, but really, really insightful, right? And so the Diversity and Multicultural Student Affairs, I was literally coming out of a meeting, and I was like, I'm just gonna walk into Anderson, walk around. I was trying to look for the food pantry. Granted, I was in the totally wrong place, but I multicultural student affairs office, and I met Dr. Bolton and Caitlin Wells, and they were absolutely amazing. We got to talking, and I ended up showing Dr. Bolton this YouTube channel of Jenny Lorenzo, and if y'all have never heard of her, she's super cool. She does these videos about Cuban abuelas and Cuban culture. It's very interesting. Y'all should watch the ones of the Cuban abuelas trying to up each other in church. So that's a really fun one. And then talking to Tremaine yesterday, it was a really insightful conversation and getting to know more about that campus climate and what we can do to kind of meet them in their spaces and support what they're doing so that they can then come into our spaces and have that trust with us. And then some of these other folks, K-State First, I shared that common read facilitation with them. I got to learn about what leadership studies looks like here. It's vastly different than my institution, and it has a lot of those academic partnerships that help them be successful, right? And then TRIO programs. I learned so much about TRIO programs, and then how we can be kind of a resource for helping them pipeline students to their office. And then another thing that I talked to Policia about was that kind of first year, second year experience with TRIO and what we could do to support them. You know, a lot of their students are having challenges of, you know, basic needs of, you know, food insecurity. I don't know how to do my laundry. I don't know about finances. Being a first generation student myself, I've connected with a lot of those things. And so we talked about like, well, what could this look like? Could we provide kitchen spaces so you all could teach your folks how to cook? Could we provide laundry facilities so you all could kind of create that program to teach your students how to do laundry, but also our students, because I know I've taught a couple of students how to do laundry myself. So the next section, How Far I'll Go by Moana. Quite different than what I thought. So this is about the leadership educational aspect of the course I was taking while I was here. And so Moana talks a lot about, you know, her island and like people being really fearful of this change and being really fearful of going about a different way. But Moana persists and she has a vision, and right, leadership is about holding that shared vision. And so I wanted to talk about my leadership studies coursework. And so overview, this is everything I did. I've actually finished all of my assignments, so I'm really happy with that. One of the major things was writing those reflection posts, and I think that that was a really salient part of kind of taking a step to think about what I'm doing here, right? And if I didn't have this course, I wouldn't have done that. And so that really, you know, made me do it, one, but I got a lot out of that. And then the other thing was keeping a blog, which was kind of an extension of that reflection. And so I'm not very original with names. So I called my blog State of University. And so here are some of the topics that I covered in my blog. So I had different posts, so we're not in Florida anymore, talking about what I was excited to do when I got here to K-State and what my position would look like. Cat-like skills, because go cats, right? And talking about the skills approach of leadership and connecting that to committee work. Midwest Nice, students first. You know, I really saw this with the ADA audit, I saw it with gender inclusive housing, I saw it with summer school. You all really go out of your way to accommodate your students and help them develop, and y'all really have servant hearts. And then that kind of connects back to a piece of, I forget where I was going with that, but it connected to short-term service learning and how I paralleled that with being in a short-term setting, right, and those challenges. And then CLH to MHK because I started running out of clever ideas. But navigating transitions in residence life work across institutions. So some of the pieces was giving historical context of student affairs, but also sharing what do each of our institutions look like, and how did we each navigate that personal transition to working here at K-State and understanding student affairs as a whole, not just student affairs from the point of view of our individual institutions. Right, Florida State is my baseline because that's where I did my undergrad, but this expanded my view even more so. And then the last one was man happiness and talking about how I actually literally fell in love with this place. Talking about local coffee shops that I'm really gonna miss because we don't have good coffee in Florida. And then also talking again about the common read facilitation and why that was the culminating experience for me. And then this leadership poster. So I'm gonna be presenting this in the fall, and if you all would like to watch me present this, I'm gonna try to set up a Zoom so that you all can watch that. But this is like the final requirement of my certificate, and I would love if you all would like to zoom into that. So some of the acknowledgments that I put on there and that I wanted to say out loud was Dr. Cook, Nick, Marcus, Alex, Brandon, of course, Aisha, Housing and Dining in general, acuhoi Housing Internship Program because they gave me a travel stipend, and the acuhoi Foundation. And then I also included my strengths on there because that conversation was really great with Brooks and talking about those strengths. And then the last part is, I won't say I'm in love. Meg from Hercules. This is my favorite Disney movie of all time. Like, this is awesome and Meg is great. It's too cliche, I won't say I'm in love. Try to keep it hidden. Honey, we can see right through you. Girl, you can't conceal it. We know how you're feeling. And, well, the writing is written on the wall. I do love it here, right? Oops. My bad. So some of the things I did in Manhattan, conglomerates of pictures and all the things we did locally, right? And then the next one was talking about those travel, getting to go to Kansas City, right? Going to the zoo with Aisha, Brent, and Brandon. We went to Wamego twice. We did the Oz Museum. You wouldn't think there's much to do in Wamego, but we did it. And we went to Shrek the Musical. And we went to the fireworks show. And Topeka, right? Going to the Brown versus Board of Education historic site and seeing the Equality House, right? And seeing that stark difference of the Equality House is right across from the Westboro Baptist Church. And there were actually people there at the church when we were at the Equality House, and like, you know, we're trying to appreciate this, but we're still very much concerned about that, being in that space. And then the last one was KU. And I have to acknowledge that Avril Lavigne was playing, because if you've heard any of us over lunch talking about Avril Lavigne, you know that Brandon and I very much believe in the theory that Avril is dead, and that she's been replaced by a clone named Melissa, right? So when they were playing, Avril hasn't been real since like 2004, I think. So I wrote K-State on one of the fridges that they had there. I had to make sure I left my mark. But I really got to have some great conversations with their folks, and I got to build on some foundational concepts that I had, whether it was residential curriculum, but I also got to share what I learned here. And this was the first real time where I was like, oh wow, I've really learned a lot here. And like being able to talk to them about accessibility on their campus. Last one, because I'm going to graduate next. So going to distance. I love this song. I would go most anywhere to feel like I belong. And so part of that goes into, y'all taught me a lot about what I want from an institution, what I want from a department. And that goes into my grad search, which if you haven't heard about the spreadsheet, this is the spreadsheet. It's really stressful, but I also really love it because if you don't know me, I love Excel. We'll get to the other rounds eventually, but we're still in round one. And then the last piece is graduating. I love challenge, of course. But yes, I'll be graduating in December, and it's really challenging not to be able to apply all that I've learned here just yet. But I know that graduate school interviews is going to be a great, this is going to be a great talking point and saying all that I learned here. But I'm not going to be able to say how much I appreciated you all, and so this is my time to say how much I appreciated being in this community with you all and sharing this space with y'all. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Awesome. If there's any questions, let me know. Chelsea.
So it's pretty apparent that you're super passionate about accessibility and students being able to have access to certain things they need, but also that aligns with your passion for making sure that students, but I've noticed specifically students of color, have access and spaces that help them feel welcome and seen and heard. And so I'm just wondering, with your time here at K-State and also in comparison to like your previous experience, how have your horizons broadened in the sense of like what you see the needs that you see being met, but then also things that you think as you go on further into grad programs and into your career, things that you will probably advocate for.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things, and I got to talk about this with some students, and I got to talk about this with Tremaine yesterday, and talking about that campus climate of, yes, we have these spaces, and we're building these spaces, and yeah, it's great to have these conversations with our students of color. We want to know what their experience is like, because this is a PWI, and they may not see themselves represented in these communities, right? But for them, it's no longer about the conversation. They very much want to see action happening at this point. And that's what Tremaine was sharing with Eddie and I yesterday. And so he said some of the things that we could do is kind of meeting them in their spaces and going and being with them and helping build that trust before we say, hey, partner with us on this, or come into this space that we have, right? They already have their spaces. We need to be action-oriented now and less about those conversations. Because, talking about diversity is one thing, but we want to make them feel included. And so I hope that answers your question. So we need to take actionable steps, and I'm hoping that the I team and Anna with MSL and SJA can kind of be that kind of foundational aspect of building that trust with them. Alex.
What challenged you the most this summer, and what was the outcome of that challenge?
Yeah, I think one of the things that challenged me was that autonomy piece. Like, I talked about it with, like, not feeling like I was being challenged. Like, I had a lot of great things that were happening, and you all are great. But, like, I still need to learn. I still need to, I like to be busy, but I shouldn't have so much free time. And I was getting a lot of my work done, and I still was having so much free time. So kind of learning to advocate for myself in a supervision relationship, and learning to advocate for myself in the department as a whole, like, hey, I have a lot to offer. What more can I do, right? And so taking on those pieces and adding those to my schedule, but then realizing I probably took on too much, and Dan told me about that from the get-go. He was like, I'm worried you're gonna take on too much. And yes, I did that. So kind of learning to kind of manage those pieces of having so much autonomy and being able to, yes, ask for those things, but recognize what's too much and what's just right. And that's gonna be a lifelong skill that I'm gonna have to keep working on throughout things. But yeah. Chelsea again.
Well, aside from the learning time management, right? I think that's super important, and learning not to stretch yourself too thin. Because I think most people that are in this profession are like, most of our personalities seem to be people who like want to do and want to give, and so that's something that we all have to learn. But aside from that, what would you say is something else that is super profound that you learned about yourself as a professional?
Yeah, I think one of the really awesome things was getting to know myself more, and having that conversation about strengths with Brooks. And I really wanted to do a whole slide on that, but we don't have time for all that. But having that conversation with Brooks, and when I first did it, I was like, I don't really see myself as a futuristic person, and that was my number one strength. And seeing how like some of those other strengths, I was like, well, these are more prevalent in my life. But sitting down with Brooks and having that conversation of where do you see these showing up in your life, right? And then taking these strengths and utilizing them to sell myself to graduate institutions as I apply for assistantships. Also think about what's that going to look like when I get back to Florida State. And that's been a real struggle of trying to understand what that piece is going to look like. But also, it's been really exciting to think about that. And like, that's why I put it on my poster, because I really want to talk about that piece when I get back to Florida State, because that was such a salient experience of learning about myself, right? And that wouldn't have been possible if, I knew nothing about strengths getting here. And I think Aisha was like, oh, you should talk to Brooks about strengths. And that conversation happened, and it was a really impactful conversation. Marcus.
Best coffee shop.
Best coffee shop. I'm kind of biased. I go to Regina's a lot. I also go to Regina's in the Union like on a daily basis because there's a barista there that's super cool. One time they asked me about the pronouns on my name tag, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. We can have a conversation about this. So it was really awesome being able to have those conversations with folks outside of student affairs, but also get some real good coffee.